Hello and welcome back to Switch and Lever. Not every story ends in success, but sometimes a project is all about trying to rescue the fallen pieces and making something passable. This is that project. This project started out as a desire to learn how to veneer MDF, to make something look more high class than it is. How hard can it be, right? I've been watching the excellent channel Kirby Meets Audio, and I've seen the speakers he's made with little effort, and I wanted to make something for myself. I started out with 3D modeling a set of speakers using some 6mm MDF I had available. I built them rather simply, just cutting the pieces and gluing them together. It's not really difficult to get a box like this built. I ended up building the general shape of the speaker first, and once the glue dried, glued on oversized pieces on the ends, which I could trim down afterwards, rather than trying to make all pieces fit together properly from the start. If you have something to hold yourself to, it's oftentimes much easier to make, rather than to make all pieces exactly correct from the beginning. I masked out the areas of the speaker enclosure which were not going to be veneered and painted them with a matte black spray paint. MDF takes paint really well, but since it's so absorbent, you may require a couple of extra coats to get the surface nice and smooth. Veneering in itself was actually not so difficult. Apply a bit of glue to both surfaces, spread it out with a sponge roller into a very thin coat, and put both sides together. Keep it under pressure until it's completely dry. I just use some heavy weights, and then continue with the next piece. It's a little time consuming to do it like this, but on the other hand, quite easy. I spent a lot of time trimming down the veneer to its final size in between gluings, to make sure I wouldn't chip out anything or tear the veneer. Even though it took a little time, it was fairly easy work, mainly done with a big disc sander and a sharp chisel. The inside holes for the speaker elements were routed out with a flush trim bit on the router table and followed up with a chamfer bit to get a nice edge. After a light sanding throughout, I filled in the chamfered edge of the MDF with a sharpie for consistent color throughout. Up until this point I had high confidence in my build. Everything was looking good, and all I basically had to do was to apply some varnish to the veneer and I could move on to fitting the electronics. Oh, how wrong I was. The varnishing immediately did not feel right. I applied a polyurethane varnish like I have on many projects before, but the veneer did not like the varnish. It doesn't show up well in the video, but it started beading up on the surface of the walnut veneer. In some places it absorbed and spread out fine, on others it was almost like mixing oil and water. At this point I felt dejected, and all I wanted to do was just throw the whole thing against the wall. I had a small hope that it would look better after drying, but even after leaving it, it looked like a failure. I honestly don't know what went wrong, but I ended up scrapping the enclosure and putting the project on hold for quite some time. Seasons changed, and gradually new hope grew. I could at least build a speaker, even if I wouldn't do the veneering, since I already had all the parts. I basically just built the same box as before from MDF, but taking extra care in the surface finish this time around. After building the box, I spent some time with filler to fix the small mistakes. This one is going to be painted with high gloss paint, unlike the last one, so the surface needs to be pristine. I spray painted the speaker enclosure with 2 coats of spray filler, with a light sanding in between to make sure the surface was as smooth as I could make it, before painting it with a nice white shiny spray paint to bring it all together. The backside was simply put in with some thin pieces of MDF, into which I could fit threaded inserts. I couldn't really glue in the backside, as I may need access into the speaker in the future. I could of course have made this speaker bigger to allow for a better way to put the back in, but I was really trying to keep the size small, so everything is a bit cramped and the back a bit finicky to put in. In the end, it may not be the speaker I wanted when I started, but it is at least the speaker I finished. Well, finished may be a bit strong, since we still have some work left to do. I set out to make this speaker using the cheapest possible means. I scoured the electronics garbage at work for some speakers with a built-in amplifier board, and finally struck gold with these discarded Harman Kardon desktop speakers. The amplifier board really had all I needed. Audio in, connections for left and right speaker, and a volume knob with integrated on-off switch. Some things will be desoldered and moved around, and others replaced entirely, but all is there. The speaker elements themselves were taken out of some desktop speakers long ago and just kept around until being used in this project. If you're into electronics and have not already a healthy habit of taking things apart and keeping for a rainy day, today is the day to start. First things first, I needed to move the volume switch from its position to be able to fit where I wanted it to be in the speaker enclosure. The switch was desoldered easily enough with a little bit of coaxing. While I was at it, I also removed the connector for the left speaker as well as the power jack, as that also will be located elsewhere. A ribbon cable was then transplanted in between the old solder points of the PCB to the corresponding legs on the volume switch, essentially extending it away from the amplifier PCB. The exact same thing was also done with the power jack. We're going to run this speaker in two ways. One via 3.5mm audio in jack, and two via 3.5mm audio cable soldered onto the jack. The jack means that you could use the speakers with any audio device, and the 3.5mm audio cable via Bluetooth. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but I'll get to Bluetooth in a minute. If you want to do this the same way as me, it's important to get hold of a switching audio jack that is able to switch between sources, or essentially turn off one source if a cable is plugged in. This is exactly how audio jacks in most devices which have headphone jacks work. The speakers are cut off when the headphones are plugged in. In this case, we're not cutting off speakers though, but rather the Bluetooth audio device which has yet to be fitted. Also, obviously connect the left, right and ground signals from the audio jack to the corresponding solder pads on the amplifier board. Alright, I've teased about Bluetooth for a while now, let's get to it. This is a USB powered Bluetooth audio receiver. It only uses USB for power and is able to connect to Bluetooth devices to transmit audio via an audio out jack. We will connect this via the 3.5mm audio jack and cable we fitted previously to our speaker amplifier board. That way we can easily use the speakers wirelessly if we so desire. We will use the 3.5mm cable we attached previously to connect to this Bluetooth receiver. The issue is though that we don't have a USB connection in our build, but that's easily rectified. Using a multimeter, find a point in between ground and anywhere else which has steady 5V power. Likely you're going to find one. Alternately, you can use a DC to DC converter directly from the power jack to step down the voltage to the 5V required for the USB. Connect these 2 points to power and ground of a female USB jack. That's basically all there is to it, and we're now ready to try out the electronics to see if everything works as it should. I would suggest testing everything before you stuff it into your enclosure. Simply, if anything is wrong, it's much easier to fix it when you're not working in cramped quarters. Make sure the switch is turned off, then plug in power to the board and turn it on. Plug in the Bluetooth receiver and connect it to the audio jack. Connect the Bluetooth from your device and play some music. I have not soldered in the speakers yet, but touching the speaker leads to the speaker is sufficient for now to see if everything works. If you wired up your switching audio jack, the audio should stop if you plug in anything into that jack, and should subsequently also start if you disconnect Bluetooth and play via cable from your device. So far so good, everything seems to be working just fine and we can work on how to fit everything into our speaker enclosure. Oh, but first, don't forget to solder wires onto your speakers. It would be difficult to do that once they're mounted. Covering your solder points with hot glue can also be a good idea to protect them both from any accidental short-circuiting, as well as provide some strain relief if we pull on them too roughly while mounting. As the MDF of the backside was a bit too thick to mount the switches through, I ended up making a quick brass plate with corresponding holes for both the power supply as well as the audio in jacks. Remember to measure twice and cut once, and that this is the backside of the speaker. If it looks a little bit rough, it's not the end of the world. To at least avoid possible mistakes in the future, I ended up stamping the proper voltage next to the power jack. Once done, the back panel was painted black to work with the rest of the speaker. I'm unsure why I chose to paint it black, but I thought it would look nicer with a contrasting backside from the rest of the speaker. Almost there now, just a couple of things left to do before assembling it all. The volume switch needs to be mounted through the enclosure. As I was indecisive before, I didn't choose a place for it, but heck, what better place than right in the middle of everything, right? The small power indicator LED was also mounted just below. I know it looks a little bit rough with the paint chipping out around the holes, but the knob and the LED bezel will entirely hide that from sight. Last thing to do before putting it together. Any speaker worth its salt has some sort of speaker grill. You can use anything really, some fabric, a perforated board of some sort, wire or mesh. I found this frying pan splatter guard from IKEA for next to nothing, and I figured a mesh could easily be used as a speaker grill. To do that, we need to mold the mesh into a better shape for the hole in the speaker. Once I cut out some mesh pieces from the guard, I used the same hole saw that I used before when I cut the MDF to cut out a disc from a thinner piece of plywood. Using this disc and the plywood it was cut from, I sandwiched it all together with the mesh in between and a couple of melamine boards on either side to keep everything together, and then simply pressed it all together in a drill press. This deforms the mesh screen into the shape we need. The space in between the disc and the hole gives space for the mesh to deform into, and the melamine makes sure that the mesh stays in place without folding up. All in all, it came out pretty nice. These were then cut down to size and holes punched so they can be mounted in between the speakers and the MDF of the enclosure. Finally, it's assembly time. Just shove everything in there, hoping it'll fit. Okay, be a little bit more systematic about it. It's really difficult getting nuts on screws down into a small enclosure like this, but putting a little dab of blue tack on the end of a drill bit and a nut on that really helps with getting the nut started on the bolt. After that, it's just a matter of screwing the nuts down and secure the speaker elements in place. The amplifier board goes in with a liberal application of hot glue to keep it all in place, making sure it's not touching the back of the speaker elements. The rest of the stuff goes in pretty much how you'd expect. Fiddling, hot gluing, screwing, the usual suspects. Just make sure you connect the speakers before you close the enclosure. Once the screws are all in, it's actually done. Believe it or not, it's actually also working. The end cost for all things in this build was maybe in total $10 or so, not counting the failed veneering build in the beginning, which is not that bad all things considered. Is it the best speaker in the world? Absolutely not. It's a fun little speaker which looks neat in the bookshelf, that's all. Will it anger the audiophiles of YouTube? We can only wait and find out. Thanks for watching this convoluted failure become sort of success. I hope you learned at least a small thing or two along the way. Remember that just because something failed at first does not mean you have to give up. It's alright to feel dejected, but the important thing is how you pick yourself up and continue in the end. I'm happy with the result I got, even though it's not the project I had envisioned when I started. While you're at it, check out the previous speaker I built, which uses no electronic components whatsoever. And then there's also that place called Instagram, where fun things take place. Or so I'm told. Until next time!